Welcome to the Creative Crafters podcast. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Elena Anderson. Elena is a lifelong crafter, having learned cross-stitch, sewing, and hard danger as a young child from her crafty aunts. She started her paper crafting journey in the 1990s with scrapbooking, which transitioned into stamping in the early 2000s. Her blog and YouTube channel originally focused on card making using stamps, inks, markers, and more. But Elena decided in late 2020 to concentrate on electronic cutting machine crafts, especially, but not exclusively, cards and paper crafts. In addition to teaching crafters how to use their machines with fun project tutorials, she designs her own SVGs, which she sells through her Etsy store and sometimes gives them away. Elena is also the creator of the Cricut Joy Summit. Sorry, that is Create with Cricut Joy Summit. She lives in Denver, Colorado with her best friend and husband of 24 years, Alex, and their sweet dog, Django. I just
Django.
hope
No.
Okay. He's like a sweet dog. And I know the listeners can't see him, but he was on screen here just a little while ago. So, Elena, please tell the listeners really who you are and all about your company.
Okay. I am when I say I'm a lifelong crafter and creative, that's very true. I've had multiple careers and all of them most of them have been in creative industries. So I've just always wanted to do creative things, and working for myself is probably the best job I've ever had. I've been a web manager. I have a degree in theater, and I was a residential interior designer and a kitchen designer before I started my crafting company. I started out my website and my blog back in 2016, and I was a traditional card maker. So I did, as you mentioned in my bio, it's all stamping and markers and dyes and inks and all that stuff. And I was on the Elizabeth Craft Designs design team for 2 years, and I really enjoyed all that, but I got really burned out. And so I quit doing it in 2018. And then when the pandemic hit, I'm a type 1 diabetic. So I was at high risk for results, and I was working as a kitchen designer in a retail store. So I didn't want to be exposed to it. And so I went on a medical leave, and I kind of needed something to do. And so I started the blog back up again and really loved it. And then I was like, I really like the electronic cutting machine thing. I had actually started out with a Cameo way back when, and I've had a scan and cut for a long time, and I had a Cricut Expression way back in the day. So I just decided I'm going to try to do those types of crafts, and I really, really love technology as also in my bio. So I really like the idea of designing SVGs. Since I've always been artistic and kind of I draw things and do things like that. And so I was like, I want to make some digital files and sell digital products. So that is kind of how I got to where I am. And then cards, because I love cards, that kind of became the focus for my SVG designs. And back in 2020, there was a sort of a trend of dies, like metal dies, that were sort of the entire card fronts. So like an A2 size, and they would layer together, and they're stunningly beautiful. I mean, people still make them, but they were really expensive, like $75 to get a set of those. And I was like, I think I can make those electronically, and it'd be a lot less expensive. So that's kind of how I started out with designing SVGs and designing cards. And then I wound up finding people like you who do summits and doing projects for summits, and I've really, really enjoyed doing those. I've gotten into more and more of them, and have been in quite a few, and will be in several coming up. And then I created my own for the Cricut Joy because that's my favorite machine. I love that tiny little machine. And I felt like, oh, poor Cricut Joy people are kind of left out of the more general Cricut summits because people tend to focus on the bigger machines. And so that's why my little Cricut Joy Summit was created, that debuted last July. And we'll be back in 2024.
Are you going to add the Joy Extra to it? I know you've just got yours because I saw a posting on your
in the Facebook group.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So both of those machines will be included in next year's. I'm really interested in the Joy Extra. I have done just a couple projects with it so far, but I really like it.
It's an amazing little machine for sure. So, part and parcel of it all, you have a really interesting name for your company, Black Sheep 303. Can you tell us, where that came from?
Sure. So, as you might imagine, I'm the black sheep of the family. Like I did not follow the course in life that my parents would have wanted me to in terms of I guess career or success per se. So that's kind of where that comes from. 303 is the area code for Denver, which is where I live. And I really wanted to be Black Sheep Creative, but that was already taken when I started. And so that's how it became Black Sheep 303 Creative, which there is a little bit of a controversy because there's another company in Denver called 303 Creative that was involved in a Supreme Court case. And my company got confused with that company because we're both in Denver. And there was some not so great stuff that happened. So I am considering changing the name, but it will still be Black Sheep. Creates, creative, something.
Okay, yeah. As long as you keep the black sheep, I think that's the important part for sure.
Yeah.
No time like the present to distance yourself from something that's controversial.
Right.
So what do you find the most important part of what you're doing right now? What is the most important part for you?
Mindset, I would say, because it can be really overwhelming. I think having a business like this, especially with social media and all of the expectations out there for, creating things and giving things away for free and always being, having new things coming out. There's a lot of pressure, and it's also difficult to keep up with just the changes in technology in terms of the YouTube algorithm has changed, the Etsy algorithm has changed, the Google algorithm has changed, all these things. And, and then the business side, which is less fun, but you still have to pay your taxes and you still have to do all that stuff. And so I have to really work to stay positive sometimes because things can go wrong and I can get easily overwhelmed. So I have to, kind of keep my brain in a more positive mindset in terms of knowing that I can get things done.
Yeah.
That I can learn things that I need to learn in order to do things I don't know how to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the important part, is helping others get, success in what they're doing. That is a really big part of everything. So when you're imagining a project you would like to create, so what's your thought process and where do you get your inspiration for doing things?
Well, I usually have an idea, some kind of idea of either from, I want to do a certain type of project from, Google search, or I'm doing a summit project. So the summit has a theme and I may know from the person making the summit, what they'd like me to do. So I'll have an idea of what the project's going to be it's going to be, say, for example, my project that comes up that will be in your next summit was a holiday tea towel design. So I will think, okay, I might do a search for some holiday tea towels just on like Google or Pinterest to get just look at pictures of ones that other people have done. And then I decided like for that project, I wanted to do something that was sort of like funny and cooking related. So like a pun, a Christmas pun. So I did a search on Google for Christmas puns involving food. And so then I make a list of like, what is that? What are those? And I'll pick one. And so then that gives me an idea of like, what's the sort of theme of the pun. And so then I'll search for something that relates to that, do like an image search. So I had like gingerbread cookies is what I needed. So I search for stuff. I find ones I like. I save the images. Then I bring them into Procreate. I'm very like tech heavy. I'll take them into Procreate and then I will trace parts of various pictures to create a new picture, like a new whole drawing of whatever I want to have, like, a gingerbread cookie or something. And then I'll export that to Illustrator. And so I do everything in Illustrator. And then I also will use a tool called wordmark.it to figure out fonts, because that'll let you type in like the words that you're going to be using, and it'll show you every font you have on your system with that word. So that helps me decide what fonts I'm going to use. And all at the same time, I'm kind of using my art training, I guess, with, sort of like, what's the feel that I want to go for the overall design. And so I pick imagery and types of fonts based on that. And then, in Illustrator, there's a lot of cleanup and a lot of laying things out and deciding on colors and all that good stuff. And eventually it all comes together and becomes a project. And then in terms of tutorials, like having a beginner's mindset is really important to me. And so, because I know how easy it is when you've been doing it for a while, to just sort of skip over steps for people who don't know anything about, like, say, Design Space or Canvas Workspace or Scan and Cut and that kind of thing. And since I sort of gear myself towards beginners, like, I want to make sure that I'm explaining everything in a way that a beginner can understand and will help them to create the project.
Yeah, that beginner mindset is so important, and it's so easy to sort of lose track of the beginner aspect of it. We were all beginners,
right,
to start, and had to learn through the process. So it's so wonderful that you're gearing it towards the beginners. So what advice would you give someone who's interested in doing what you do?
I would say go for it. But go for it. But I think it's important to have a plan. But don't allow planning to stop you from moving. So I think for me, fear has always been something that's held me back, and kept me from trying to do the things that I've really always dreamed of doing. And I think that's pretty common, with people, that you feel like, oh, I'm going to be judged, or I want to do it just right and I can't do it, or I'm not creative enough. And just none of that's true. Like, you should really just believe in yourself and take a chance, and making mistakes is great. It took me a really long time to learn that making mistakes was a good thing, and that you should just try. And if you screw up, which you will, that you just have to learn what what you did wrong, and then take another step forward and use that learning process to grow.
Yeah, it just reminds me of, I think it was the Edison quote. He found like 99 ways that a light bulb would not work, and he found the one that did. So he had to go through all his mistakes too. And none of us are immune from mistakes. I'm doing a lot of design work now for the Countdown project. So printing and cutting it and going, oh, I got to adjust. Oh, I got to adjust.
Oh, yeah.
So never worry about it. I just love the way that you bring beginners right into the fold to help them along the way. So one last question is, what is the best way to get a hold of you besides going to blacksheep303.com?
Get on my email list, honestly, because that's where most of what's going on with me is sent out. I'll be honest, I've been pretty bad about my like sort of general content this year because I've been focusing on doing projects for summits and then creating my own summit. And so those aren't really advertised to the general public, really. You know, like they're not, I don't post the things on my website, so you're not going to see the projects. But some of those projects are my best projects, and you get them for free if you attend the summit. So joining my email list is a great way to find out about the summits that I'm in, or my Facebook page. I usually post stuff on there too.
Yeah, so they just look for Black Sheep 303. And go to
Yeah, if you go
blacksheep303.com and sign up for the newsletter. I think that's probably the
there's
easiest.
a bar at the top, and then there's also on the side, there's a sign up box too.
Well, thank you so much, Elena. You've been really informative, and I just love the direction for beginners. It's absolutely perfect. And this has been the Creative Crafters podcast. Until next time, thank you for listening.